Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler, and I'm saying a little prayer for you. Today we are spotlighting the number 8 film on the best rom-coms list, My Best Friend's Wedding. Today's guest is Sarah Medin, who was with us back in September to cover 2 weeks' notice. She said she really enjoyed her time when we discussed that movie and wanted to come on to talk about another rom-com. So she signed up for this one, and we had a great discussion about that movie. Before I bring Sarah in, I wanted to bring in my wife and frequent co-host Whitney to quickly talk about the movie, but more importantly, before we jump into the movie, people are always asking us what we think about The Bachelor. We haven't covered the finale yet. So, what do you think about Joey's ultimate decision?
Hi, everybody.
I know. I'm sorry. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing good.
I actually like it. I think that I was surprised by the pick because I do think the show kind of hides who the final person will be or tries to. And so they didn't really let us get to know Kelsey until right at the very end. But I liked Daisy. I thought she was sweet. But they did start to show that just he was real kind of goofy and fun with whatever her name was. What was her name? Kelsey. See, I don't even know her. So I did think, though, the ending just showcased everybody in just such a positive light because I thought Daisy was just very classy. At first, I didn't understand why she had to go to Kelsey. But it actually, as I've sat on it and thought about it, I really did like it because, one, if she had just left, he could have been choosing her and she would have just left him at the altar and she just couldn't do that. But two, she was also friends with Kelsey. And so she just went and said, how is it gone? And when it was different, she was like... She was good, and I think that her it just showcased how high her emotional IQ was to intuit that he was not picking her, and that it wasn't her, and that was okay, and so I really liked that. And then I think he was classy in just that he was sad still. He felt bad that it wasn't her. It just brought everybody off in a really good light, I thought, which is strange for that show. So I don't really know how they'll rebound from that because if you have the next person, if they're not that nice, I just don't know how it's gonna play.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I thought that was good. There's a lot of things that right during I was like, it's just that finale is so long. I just don't understand why it's so long. But it was good.
Yeah. And people really were high on this season as a whole.
Yeah.
Really liked Joey a lot. I mean, I think
he was good at talking through things with people.
Yeah.
He asked good questions. He didn't seem just boring.
Yeah. He seemed to be real and honest with the girls, but not mean. Seemed as sincere as someone on The Bachelor
could be. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so, it'll be real interesting because, so Jen was announced as the next
did
Bachelor.
You like that?
I mean, she seems fine. I think she's gorgeous. I don't think it will be a bad season, but she
seemed wild. They were trying to show her as wild.
Right.
I don't know if she will end up being that wild, but they were trying to show that side of her.
Yeah, and I don't know if it became a meme on the internet, but I thought it was really funny. She decides to take a shot with Jesse on stage, and Jesse just completely messed up the protocol of taking a shot with somebody. Just took it before they even
clinked or
toasted,
anything,
or anything like that. So no, I think she'll be great. I think it's great from a representation standpoint. It seems like an interesting choice just as far as because I was kind of in and out of the season, I was kind of doing things while I was on. So it was kind of oh, okay, who, Jen? I just don't, for her sake, I hope she is a strong personality to do what she wants. And I didn't, sometimes I think, basically, I didn't want the producers to kind of do what they want because Kelsey was definitely someone like that. When she wrote that note to Joey in the season of I want to talk, clear, and she didn't, it was all fun, but that clearly messed with his head. Kelsey, you could see the producers got to her on that point, and I didn't know if Jen would be that type of person.
Well, she seemed pretty strong. When they were showing her at the end, stronger than she showed in the season.
Yeah.
I did think it was funny that they had to show, announce to all of us that Daisy turned them down. because it like showed them that they needed to prep us that it wasn't Daisy and that it was somebody else, and that Daisy chose that it wasn't her. I thought that was kind of funny, but I sometimes think it's better if it's not the person that was like the final 1, 2, or 3. I mean, obviously not the final one, that would be weird, but the final 2 or 3, because it like lets them be somebody that didn't fall in love.
Right. Yeah.
Because I also think if you've just fell in love with somebody, like if you're not falling in love with somebody else that's like pretty similar to the person, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I liked it overall. I think it'll be good. There was parts about the end that were just pretty obvious, like Kelsey got the best date ever and Daisy got a terrible date. Like if you ever have to go and meet with the shaman and breathe heavy smoke and not talk to each other, you're in a lot of trouble. So
weren't they like in a heated cave or something
and then
like
you're
that?
like thinking about your like life's lessons that it's trying to teach you, like and then the other one get to go on a romantic like massage, couples massage.
Just
out.
in a nice little room. You're out. Yeah, I do have a quick question for you. So I do think, like you mentioned, I thought it was really cool that Daisy, was upfront with Kelsey and kind of supported her with that. And I know this is a weird world where like all these women become friends, even though they're dating the same guy. Would you be able to basically, because Daisy said she loved Joey, to, if you realized you were like, he wasn't going to propose to you, support a friend that much by sharing a limo with that person on the way to their engagement?
Well, probably not, but I don't think I could do any of that. I would be so bothered by all of the people. So I don't know. I don't think I could do it, but I don't know. Yeah. The whole thing's weird. I thought that was weird, but I also don't want to hold hands with somebody that long. So they were holding hands all the time too, and I was like, okay. But how long was Kelsey sitting there out in that limo? Like, that took a long time. Yeah. To edit, walk down, reshoot, get him to quit crying. Like, it's just like weird. It's a lot.
That's a lot. But did this season give you hope for future Bachelor world?
Yeah, I didn't know if they could do it after like the Golden Bachelor. Like, I didn't know how it was going to go, and so I thought it was good. It way followed the like script as it should.
Okay, so great. Mm-hmm. Any last minute thoughts
about the Bachelor?
Yeah,
no.
Okay.
I mean, I have other thoughts. You want to hear other things?
Well, I will say that one quick thing. I thought it was interesting that Joey and Kelsey, their plan was to live in New Orleans, where she's from, but then they're going to move to New York City, like
because they'll get deals.
Yeah, what deals though? I mean, I know they
go out and then people sponsor them and they get nightlife and they're out. They got to be seen. You're not seen in New Orleans.
Well, New Orleans is a pretty big city.
But they're not seen with all the other people. Like, they got to move with the other Bachelor people.
Yeah, I don't know. Going into today's movie, we did watch My Best Friend's Wedding together. So before I get your thoughts, just a quick setup to the movie if people aren't aware. But this movie was released in 1997 and directed by P.J. Hogan. In the story, Julianne Potter, played by Julia Roberts, realizes she's in love with her best friend, Michael O'Neill, portrayed by Dermot Mulroney, just as he announces his engagement to another woman, Kimberly Wallace, played by Cameron Diaz. Faced with the dilemma of whether to confess his feelings or support her friend's happiness, Julianne embarks on a series of hilarious and heartfelt antics to win Michael's heart before it's too late. Upon its release, it emerged as a global box office hit and was recognized at the Golden Globes for Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy, Best Actress for Roberts, and Best Supporting Actor, Rupert Everett. So, with all that said, Whitney, so it had been a little while since you had seen this movie, right? Like, what was your initial feelings about the movie?
Well, I have a lot of initial feelings that I will share, except I am just flabbergasted because when you started this podcast, you said it was number 8.
Number 8.
And that's terrible. It should not be number 8. I am a little surprised it's on the rom-com list, except that it is a rom-com.
It is, yeah.
I get that, but number 8, it should not be number 8. So that's terrible. So my thoughts are that Julia Roberts can make anything, like, she's magnetic and you find her appealing and all the things. So I can get behind that. But just my quick thoughts were, and I thought this when I first saw it in the other day, they make the two men look too much alike. They're so confusing.
Yes.
And I've always thought that, and I, for the life of me, cannot ever remember one except one, is a gay man and the other one isn't, but that's about the only difference between the two.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
2, it's really terrible what she does to her. It's just really horrible. And so I don't really get that. But they never really make her out to be an evil. What's her name? The Cameron Diaz.
Kimberly.
Kimberly.
Yeah.
They never make her out to be evil. Like, they could make you hate her, and then it's okay that she's doing these things.
Yeah.
They don't. They really just make Julia Roberts doing crazy things, which I get. Women do crazy things, and so like, I do like that her friend just tells her like, "You're doing terrible things. Don't do that."
Yeah.
And, like, supports her. So I kind of like how it ends.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But it's just pretty crazy. The singing scenes are just meant to be in there to make you remember the movie and to like it. And that's why I liked it the first time, but
yeah,
they're kind of weird and cheesy, but
yeah. I won't spoil my conversation with Sarah, but we very much kind of touched on the same things you did and kind of had the same feelings about that. So before we go into that conversation, a quick question for you. What do you think is the craziest, stupidest thing you've done for the affection of another man?
I don't know. I don't know. I do know that I do think there's like girl drama surrounding somebody. I maybe should have been prepped for this question, but the first thought that came in my head.
Real quick, do you think... We kind of, Sarah and I talked.
I'm about to tell you a great story, but fine.
No, I was just, Sarah mentioned, we did talk about how this movie did seem to get that dynamic kind of, even though what Julia Roberts' character does is like kind of insane, for lack of better terms. That kind of tension, the movie seems to capture well. Would you agree? Okay.
I do.
Sorry to cut you off. I apologize.
So there was this guy that I always had like a crush on, but he was never going to go out with me. Mm-hmm. And I knew that. Like, he was a little younger than I was, and we were friends, but we were never going to be a good match, like, which was fine. But another friend of mine kind of liked him. She was also not going to go out with him, and I knew that. Like that was not going to be a thing. But I remember a New Year's where she kind of teased about kissing him at midnight, and it just infuriated me. Yeah. And I knew I wasn't going to kiss him at midnight. Neither one of us were going to. But
were you guys with him on midnight?
Yeah, we were. But I was hosting the party. She was a guest at my house. He was a guest at my house. And I was like, I'm going to have to uninvite you. Like, you're going to be kicked out of the party. And I just was like, I would have done something mean to her. But I don't remember how it all played out. But
yeah. You don't remember who he ultimately did kiss that night?
I don't think anybody. I don't know.
It was just kind of a friend.
It was like a whole friend party. Nobody came with like dates.
Yeah.
She was of no like, there was no reason for me to be jealous of her because he didn't even know she existed in the world. Yeah. Like, but I think she was just messing with me, and it messed with me. So.
That's a good story. Mm-hmm. I think I might have heard that one, but it's been a while.
I don't know. Well, it wasn't you, Nathan. You are younger than me.
It's true.
But it wasn't you.
True. Whitney has a type, everybody. You were about to...
I do. Rude.
You had another thought. No. You looked like you had another thought.
No, I forgot. I don't get to give recommendations on this, but...
We could bring you in at the end if you wanted to give a recommendation.
I do want to give a recommendation.
Okay. Well, we'll jump into the conversation, and then at the end of the podcast, stay tuned. That's it'll keep people on the edge of their...
It's not that good of a recommendation.
Okay.
Well, but come back for me.
Well, let's grab our karaoke microphone and see if My Best Friend's Wedding deserves its spot as number 8.
No, 48 maybe.
Michael and Julianne have been best friends for years.
The one constant thing in my life is that he'll always be there.
But they were never more than that.
Call me, 4 a.m, whatever, we gotta talk.
Until he popped the question.
I called because I met someone.
To someone else.
Well.
We're getting married.
He was in love with me every day for 9 years. Me!
I can see why.
Look, she has known him for what, like 5 seconds? I can't lose him, George. I'm a busy girl. I've got 4 days to break up a wedding and steal the bride's feather. Oh!
Hey, Sarah, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm so glad that you were wanting to come back on.
It was really fun the first time, so I was honored to be able to be asked back. I guess I
Yeah.
didn't do too shabby a job the first time.
Oh no, yeah, no, it was awesome. It was great, and I just, even though I knew we had that kind of connection, just of enjoying like good shows and that sort of thing, it was totally enjoyable. So I'm glad you were willing to, like, you reached out to me and said, hey, do you have any other movies that haven't been claimed? And for some reason, this movie wasn't, and so I was like, yeah, sure. And so usually I kind of like try to lengthen the time between guests just to make sure they don't get tired of me. But we saw that this was leaving Netflix, and so we kind of watched it real fast, and I reached out to you. So thanks for being willing to do this. I guess my question to you is, so did you have a relationship to this movie at all?
I remember seeing it quite a few times when it first came out. And I feel like the 80s and 90s were really the golden era of rom-coms.
Yes.
They were done well. Julia Roberts, of course, was, the queen of the rom-com. And I had a dear friend, and you know her growing up, Lisa Diarman Metzler, that loved this movie. This was her favorite movie. And so we spent lots of time together, watched it over and over and over again. So I remember I've probably seen this movie at least 20 to 30 times.
Oh, wow.
But then I have not seen it in probably a good 10 to 15 years. And so watching it now, having been married almost 24 years, having some life experience, it was a very different experience watching the movie now that I know more about life. But yes, so there is definitely a personal relationship with this.
Yeah. So, so this was a movie I thought I had seen before.
Mhm.
And as we were starting it and as it was going, I was like, Whitney, I haven't seen this movie before, which I was a little surprised because, I mean, I knew the songs from it. So I think I've seen I've seen lots of scenes from it. And Julia Roberts, obviously, like, there was something about her in this like purple bridesmaid dress that always stood out to me. And I don't know if, I'm not a big fashion person, but is that a dress that's kind of like iconic as far as how Kate Hudson has the yellow dress and,
Yes.
10 Things I Hate About You. No, not 10 Things I Hate About You. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I didn't know if this dress had that connection, but that's just, there's something about this movie cover. I don't know if I had friends who had the soundtrack, or like, it's just this movie poster is very like etched into my brain. And so as the movie went on, it was completely different than what I thought it was going to be. And so I laughed at your message before we hopped on into this conversation. I don't have the exact quote, but you said, I forgot how much I hate this movie with some laughing emojis. So won't you dive into that a little more?
So what I think is funny, I was actually at dinner with some girlfriends before I came on to be on the podcast, and we were talking about it. And one of my dearest friends goes, "Oh my gosh, I love that movie. Like, I quote it all the time." And she said, well, my family and I will just walk around going, Kimmy, or there's my turn, or whatever the case may be. So it's very quotable. It is very memorable as far as, the scene in the restaurant with the singing the song together, and the waiters are in the background with lobster hands. I mean, there are so many things that are so memorable and iconic. But as I watched it, Julia Roberts is just despicable as a human being in this movie. And I thought, gross. Like, I didn't understand. And as he refers to her as pond scum towards the end of the movie, when she finally reveals all of her devious deeds, I thought, yeah, that's not even a good enough description for you. Like, you really have no moral compass with all of the ways that you have manipulated in this situation just to get what you thought you wanted. It was just, yes, that part of it, deep down, as a person, I could not stand her. And it was such a deviation from any other character she had played at that point, where she was the queen of rom-coms. And she was, quirky, but lovable. And I mean, obviously beautiful, but really just no redeeming quality whatsoever as a person. So that's really kind of what stayed with me. And my husband kind of walked in and out as I was watching this movie and preparing. And he goes, is it everything you remembered it would be? And I said, it is so much worse. I was like, I hate this movie. And he just kind of looked at me and I started laughing. I said, well, there we go. We're taking a total 180 from what I thought I would.
Yeah. Yeah. As I was watching this movie, I was like, okay, take Julia Roberts, the person, the actress, out of this movie. And I almost think you plop in any other actress and this movie would be despised.
Yes.
Because, it's Julia Roberts, right? She's gorgeous. She has charisma, her laugh, so memorable. And it was one of those things. I was with you. I was just like around the halfway point. I was like, I really don't like this person. And even I know there has to be some kind of redeeming arc at the end of this thing. I mean, it's a rom-com, right?
Sure.
But I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be quite sold on feeling, good or bad for her or whatever. And so, yeah, I was kind of with you. I was a little shocked. So this is number 8 on the best rom-coms list.
Oh, wow.
It must be, I don't know. I was like you. This was not my favorite, but I want to kind of pitch something to you a little bit. I was trying to kind of think of why necessarily, because I really like the premise of this movie, because I think not that I necessarily had a best friend I was in love with who got married, but I think everybody's had probably a friendship with someone that they were attracted to, maybe started just as friends, became attraction, and then they go somebody else. Like I think most everybody's been in that type of situation before, even at a young age, when you had a crush on someone and then, your friend unexpectedly started dating them or something like that. So I think everybody can relate to this premise, so to speak. And I like the whole story of having to be part of this wedding and having to blend in, so to speak, or whatever like that. I felt like this movie would actually work as a more serious drama. So just the story itself, because I think where it doesn't work is the scene that you mentioned, the restaurant scene with all of them singing. I think it's an adorable, cute scene, but there's just something totally off with it's the rom-com trope. So I might be wrong, but I feel like this script was probably more serious in nature, and it just felt like it had been doctored up to kind of fit these tropes that were so popular in the 90s at the time. I don't know how you feel about that thought that I've had.
No, I can see that. And I agree with you. I think if it was any other actress in that role, it would have flopped. It would not have been as popular. Yeah. But I think because, she was at the height of her popularity and all of this, really could almost do no wrong in Hollywood. That's why because everybody else that was in it, like Cameron Diaz had been in a handful of movies.
Yeah.
Dermot Mulroney had been in some, but not as well known. This was one of Rupert Everett's first in the US that he had done, as I started reading. And so she was really the standout in the movie. And so I think that's why people went to see it and saw it so many times. But I agree with you that I think that was the saving grace. And what was interesting, though, I was kind of watching, because I'm always curious if there's deleted scenes or things that we haven't seen. There's only one, and we'll kind of talk about that later. But as I was watching some interviews, they were interviewing the director. And I was not familiar with him, but apparently he had directed Muriel's Wedding before this. That was his big directorial credit, was Muriel's Wedding. And apparently all of this was planned. He wanted the quirky things in it to make it distinctive. And I thought, okay, you're different. So I really, it took such a weird turn. And I think because of the corniness and the quirkiness, that's why maybe it is so popular, because it does not follow your normal rom-com roadmap per se.
Yeah. I just feel like if this was a little bit more grounded in reality, and all movies are, elaboration of, stories and life and stuff like that. And so for instance, when Cameron Diaz's character Kimberly stumbles upon them, and Jules kisses Michael, played by Dermot Mulroney, and she sees him, and then that whole tension is definitely a moment. And yeah, that's kind of when she kind of declares her love for him and everything. That part work for me. But then when the chase ensues, and Jules steals a bread truck and they're racing. That's what I mean. It's like this, like, total like polar opposites types of things. And so, yeah, that's kind of what was, thrown off to me. But I can see, I almost think, and we'll talk about the soundtrack later. It's almost like, I feel like the soundtrack kind of mask the kind of faults in this movie, because even though there's that chase, like the song that plays over it has always just been like kind of a favorite of mine for whatever. I think it's what the world needs now is love.
Mhm.
And and that's also kind of a trope, like a lot, Sleepless in Seattle, You Got Mail, have kind of all use these classic romantic songs, but I think there's just those type of elements that maybe kind of trick people to think this is a better movie than it is.
Well, especially in that chase scene where it's so driven emotionally. She's bared her heart to him, and then they're caught in the moment by his fiance. They're supposed to get married that day, and then they're chasing around. Then you have this crazy chase scene, but you have that song in the background, and I'm thinking, this is not love, this is chaos. Like, nothing about this is love or peaceful, or I just thought it was such an odd selection for that scene. And I do enjoy that song. And I mean, and I listening to the songs again, because I knew we would talk about soundtrack, I kind of went through and was reading what the songs are. I'm like, I enjoy all of these songs, but this is such a weird one to put at this moment. And I'm wondering if, somewhere someone is cringing that their song was used in this particular scene of the movie.
Yeah, their state might not have been too happy about it. Yeah, and I think really for me, like, when it really comes off the hinges is like when she hacks into his it's always there is a lot of side characters here. Michael's future father-in-law, his like hacks into his computer, and I was like, what is happening here? And I don't know if it's just because email was starting to become like a thing or something like that this scene exists or whatever. And I know we're supposed to be like, oh, she didn't hit like send or whatever like that. But I almost felt relieved when she didn't. But then, as soon as I knew it was going to be sent as soon as she saved it for whatever reason. I don't know. Yeah, that's when I was like, this movie is very, very, very inconsistent.
Well, it made me giggle in that scene because my husband works in security and, trying to hack into a computer, in 1997 is very different than what it is now.
Right.
But when she's typing that email, when she's sending it to Michael's editor, she doesn't even put his email address. She just types his name. And I'm like, how is it going to know where it's supposed to go? Like, it was just, a very funny little scene. But the fact she'd like written it all out and had her piece of paper and was typing from them. I mean, it was very calculated, whatever she was doing. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like some aspects of her character that I did like that she was definitely like a strong like female presence like in this movie. Like I kind of liked not the like there's definitely the traits that make her very unlikable, but just kind of like an independent person who, is career driven. That's probably not a whole lot of what we saw in the 90s. And we'll talk a little bit kind of about the ending and how it was a little kind of unconventional, as far as like, it didn't quite tag on like usually the ending you would get from this type of movie. Mm-hmm. But I really, you mentioned it, I think the cast overall is another thing that shines in this movie, kind of maybe adds a little gloss to it that makes it seem a little bit better. But like, I've kind of like, when Cameron Diaz was definitely in her height, I was always kind of like, I don't know. And there's definitely, I think, movies she's been better in and not as good in, but she's almost like Adam Sandler to me. I think now that some time has has passed, and like I'm not as judgmental as far as like just because they're popular, but I actually like Cameron Diaz a lot in this movie. I don't know how you feel about her performance.
First of all, let me say, Julia Roberts, one thing I did love about this as a naturally curly haired girl, I love that they embraced the curls. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
yes, because that is not normally a hairstyle you would see in a romantic comedy. So I loved that she was so individual and she was very true to herself with her sense of style. And she was, very career driven, but she also was very smart. She was very articulate and, obviously very passionate about the things that she was interested in. And those are things that I did appreciate because sometimes in these rom-coms, women start to lose their identity and they aren't really true to who they are. It's all about, what does the man want me to be? And even with the intro song, Wishing and Hoping, which that is another really iconic moment from this movie that people know it. Like you see that and you instantly know what movie it is. But all of that is talking about changing who you are to get a man. But then that's completely opposite of how the storyline goes. And so I thought that was so funny. Just kind of watching it again after all these years, but it was so opposite of what she was. And so, yes, so that I did appreciate. Now, as far as Cameron Diaz, yes, there were things I really appreciated about her performance. She was, my friends were calling, oh, it was baby Cameron Diaz. I mean, she was very young when she did this, and you can tell, how young she is. I think my biggest struggle with her is that she's so bright-eyed and dreamy and wants to just get married. I think she's in love with the idea of being married. That she is going to wake up in a few years and realize I have lost myself. We saw moments of that where she's like, well, I want to go back to school. And there was truth in what has happened in this situation. I want him to work for my father's company. So watching that now as a woman in her mid 40s, and I'm truly midlife, that I'm looking at her going, yep, you're going to wake up in a few years and realize that you have sacrificed everything and you really had kind of given up her identity, like not finishing school and just to follow him around. That bothered me about that character, that you can see the youth in that. You can see the mistakes that are going to be made and that are being made. Like their relationship was not great. I kept going, red flag, red flag. Let's see what's happening here. But, as a character, I love it. I love, like, you can tell there's closeness in their family, like she with her parents, and there's a level of respect there. I was a daddy's girl. Like I can see that in her character as well, and seeing how all of that comes together. And I could see why she would be a threat to Julia Roberts, because, she was almost the complete opposite. Like you see a more demure woman, whatever you want, honey, as opposed to I'm gonna get what I want. There was definitely a clash of who they were at the core.
Yeah. I just I think what I liked about her character was that I thought they would really paint her maybe as well. Once again, this movie didn't go in the direction that I didn't think that the Cameron Diaz character was the one I would be like rooting for. Not the Julia Roberts character, but they did that well. And that's what I think, like, this movie, I don't think it's actually trying to make an argument that Kimberly and Michael are, like you mentioned, are going to end up like in a good spot. And that's like the components of like what I kind of liked about this movie. Like I could see it being something, but then I almost feel like it doesn't know what it actually is building up. The intro. Yes. When the intro happened, that's when I thought, like, okay, I kind of like the vibe of this movie. Like, this is clearly not, it's not, Julia Roberts isn't in this scene, right? It was definitely a unique intro to this movie. And I was like, all right, yeah, I like this vibe. But then, yeah, it definitely changed after that. And so talking about characters, well, real quick, do you have any strong feelings about Dermot Mulroney?
I enjoyed him. I think he doesn't know what he wants, and watching him kind of drift from one to the other. I mean, there is obviously a very strong attraction between he and Julia Roberts. There is flirting going on. I mean, there are mixed signals right and left. So I just kind of watched that and thought, you can get mad at her all you want to, but you have been fanning this flame and this fire very well. It's not like, you're trying to be Mr. Chaste. Like, you are really making choices that are going the other direction. But, I like him because he's handsome and he's fun and he's charming. And you can tell that he wants to settle down and he wants things that have not been part of his life before. And so I can appreciate that in his character. But I kind of just question him as a man, that if he's going to be true and if he's going to make good choices, or, I'm sure there are temptations on the road that I don't know if he's going to be able to withstand those. So I don't know.
Yeah, we saw over the winter break, we saw Anyone But You, the romantic comedy with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, and he plays a dad in that movie. And he's a very handsome guy, but he's just older now. So you were talking about Cameron Diaz, and so like seeing that recently, and then like going to this movie where he's like in his 20s and like he just looked so young. It was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, he's an actor. He's been around a long time and I don't think he's ever bad in anything, but he definitely like, as far as 90s rom-coms goes, kind of, if you had a bingo card or just a tally card, like once again, a rom-com in the 90s that hits on a journalist job or some kind of prestigious. I just like how it's like he's a sports writer, but there's like, oh no, it was kind of, to me, it was like a masking of what a real sports writer would be. It'd be, it was a lot of talk about like, yeah, I'm a sports writer, and it's like, nobody would ever talk about that. But I don't know about you, but I thought a really big standout was Rupert Everett as her friend George. In a way, Julia Roberts definitely like commands this movie, commands your attention, but like I just think his addition is just wonderful in this movie.
He really is what elevated the comedy, I think. Otherwise, it really would have taken a very serious kind of dark turn without him. Every scene he's in, he steals. And I was telling my kids earlier today, which they didn't watch this, but I said, he is one of the first gay best friends that were in a romantic comedy. Like, that really wasn't a thing before him. And I noticed even a couple times in the movie, he's like whispering, and I'm getting, it was really kind of a big tradition thing that they had done at that point. And it was so great and so funny, and just how he's trying to mock her and humiliate her because she has made such bad choices and lied about their relationship and about who he is. And he was just hysterical. He's one of my favorite parts of this movie. I love that he keeps encouraging Jules to do the right thing and to tell the truth and to be honest and to live in that truth. And she needed somebody like that, somebody that's willing to be real with her and encourage her to be truthful, because it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of that going on in other parts of her life.
Yeah, and that's why I like to definitely like funny, but not he's not a caricature, and definitely brings like lots of the moments to like, like being very truthful with Jules, and just real grounded, and for better for worse, kind of groundbreaking as far as the gay best friend. But then of course it kind of becomes like a trope that you see like in other rom-coms, like after this one, of like, it's like, I'm sure a lot of the community was like, really, is this the only roles that we have, is the best friend to the, female who's like trying to figure out her love life, but he's so good in this movie. And honestly, I was looking up his IMDb, and for some reason I didn't know his name, even though he's done a whole lot of things and he's been around for a really long time. But I thought he was great in this movie.
The other really kind of cool little moment is when Julia Roberts is in the hallway after that email had been sent, and Michael got notification from his boss that he had gotten this email, be aware of the family you're about to marry. And she's in the hallway smoking and, feeling terrible about herself while Michael is on the phone. And here comes Paul Giamatti. bellhop. And as I started looking, he had done just a handful of little spot roles on different things, but this is really kind of one of his first movies. And I thought, oh my word, to see the progression of his career, you know, from bellhop to, you know, into an Academy Award winning movie, you know, this year. I just thought it was really interesting to see that. I thought, oh, it's so funny when you see people in the very beginning of their career when they're trying to make it. But I thought that was really funny. And, you know, there were some other memorable faces like Kimmy's mom and dad. I know I have seen them in tons of different things. And the uncle, I don't even know what his name was, but the one that like sings his own solo when they're at the restaurant. Like I recognize all these faces that I have seen in many, many movies or TV shows. And so it was interesting. I may not be able to call them by name, obviously, but you know, I've seen them in various things.
Yeah. Well, the great character actor, Emmett Walsh. I can't remember if he was necessarily an uncle, but he just actually recently passed away. But yeah, definitely like he was, you know, a face. I was like, oh, hey, you know, it was kind of almost timely that, you know, I would never have pinned that he was going to be in this in this movie. He's been in a lot of Coen Brothers movies and stuff like that. But yeah, a whole lot of familiar faces. Yeah, and when Paul Giamatti popped up, I was like, oh my gosh, what? You know, and I mean, he definitely. I mean, it's a scene, and it's like, oh man, he had a great reel to put together with that with that scene with Julia Roberts. So I kind of wondered if they had like. I mean, obviously, that was probably such a big break for him. I wonder if there's been any connection between the two, just like I remember when, or if they have any kind of relationship at all, just because this had to be such a, you know, it had to jumpstart his career like in a huge way.
Sure, absolutely. And he has such depth for even such a quick little side character.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's fair to talk a little bit about the ending of this movie, which I personally really liked the ending of this movie, despite not really enjoying a lot of what led up to it, because she doesn't end up, you know, with Michael at the end, and then also bringing like George back into it, you know, as far as I guess basically not sending her off with like, you know, this, you know, I don't know, just this great love story. Like she's evolved as a person, and you feel like, even though you haven't really liked her much through the movie, you do feel like, okay, she's like, maybe she'll make a turn or whatever. But what do you feel about the ending?
So what was really interesting, the only deleted scene I found was a different ending. And the way they originally filmed it, it showed Jules sitting outside the reception. She's on the phone with George. And John Corbett walks up with a couple of other groomsmen, and he stops and he talks to her, and she's like, and she's being really ugly to him. She's like, I'm on the phone, like, leave me alone, quit talking to me. And finally he's like, do you want to go in and dance? She's like, no, I'm on the phone, like, call me in 2 years, you know, I don't want to do this. And George is encouraging her to go. He's like, he sounds great, like, you should go. And she said, no, I don't want to, I'm not interested, you know, I've just lost the love of my life, whatever the case may be. So then it goes forward and they go into the tent, and she actually ends up walking up to him, and you don't hear the dialogue because the music starts playing, but then she ends up going out and dancing with him on the dance floor. You can see they're connecting. And then it takes a really weird turn where then it shows all of the wait staff and the chefs like back in the back of this tent singing and dancing along with the band. It is so weird. And you can actually find it on YouTube. And that's where I sat and watched it. And I thought, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So when they first released this movie and they had people come in and watch it, it tanked. Like the entire energy of the theater dropped at the end of the movie, and people hated the ending. So that's when they refilmed it and made it where George came out, because they felt like this doesn't serve the character. Like, she's been strong. She's been stating her opinion and what she wants and desires. And then she's just going to cave the first time a man crosses her path. And then all of a sudden things are happy again. So that's why they changed it. And then it was great from there. And it really fit the character and the story better. And I thought that was just so interesting. And this was really, I think it was about the time that John Corbett was on Sex and the City. So he was starting to become more of a familiar face and character. And I think it was also right before he did My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That was
it's around the same time.
And so it was so interesting and so odd. And especially with the whole tent scene with the wait staff, like that went on for a good like 5 minutes. I'm going, what is happening? Like, why are you focusing on all these people that we know nothing about? And they literally are like standing there dancing in their white coats and hats. I mean, it was so odd. But so seeing that with George, seeing how, she can still smile, she can still laugh. Like, no, she's not okay. And any normal woman would not be in that situation. It's going to take some time to heal and to get over that. But yeah, I enjoyed the ending. It is very different than what you normally find in a rom-com. And I appreciate that, because if it just is so predictable, then you have a Hallmark movie. So that's not exactly what you want. Don't get me wrong. I love a good Hallmark movie, and I'll sit and watch them. But I can tell you, at a minute and 30 or an hour and 36 minutes is where the conflict hits, and then an hour and 51 is where there's a misunderstanding is then explained, and then they have a kiss at an hour and 58 minutes. So I can tell you exactly what the formula is, but that's not what you want from a traditional rom-com.
Yeah, and I'm glad you expounded. I had read about the deleted scene, so after my feelings about just the initial ending, and even just reading that she meets a man, played by John Corbett, I was just like, oh gosh, like, yeah, no, that's exactly why I liked the ending of this movie, but also how it just plays out with, the phone conversation with the massive phones, right, in this movie, which is really enjoyable to watch. But like the conversation with George, and then, but the way that the song that the band is playing, how that ties into the movie as well. It's just a kind of a definitely a nice moment. But yeah, it's interesting that like as you had said, just reading about this alternative ending is kind of like, yep, that kind of tracks with it, like the vibe that's going on here.
Movie Musings.
Since I was younger when this movie came out, I always remember there was this thing about like, hey, you have a best friend, and you make a pact that like when you're not if you're like not married by this age, that we'll get together. Like, did you remember that at all? Like as a teenager, was that a thing, or am I just making that up in my head?
I think I had friends that made those pacts. The guy friends I had, I would not have wanted to have been married to them. So that was not a choice for me. Plus, I had boyfriends like pretty consistently growing up. So I was, falsely confident that I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be fine. Someone's going to want me. It's not going to be a big deal. But no, I think so. And I mean, even Friends, that was a huge part of their relationships on that TV show. You're my marriage buddy, and I think Phoebe had both Ross and Joey.
Yeah, had the back end
that went around at that time.
Yeah. I had forgotten about the Friends thing as well, or something like that. But I just, even being in college, I remember people like would jokingly kind of make those little packs a little bit, especially with the pressure of being at a place like Baylor that like, everybody talked about getting your MRS degree and stuff like that, so like,
oh yes, ring by spring or your money back.
Right. Mm-hmm. So everybody would make those jokes, but there was always like kind of like some truth like hidden behind it as well. So yeah. So my second question, a very simple question, but creme brulee or Jell-O?
I actually hate creme brulee, so I guess I would have to choose Jell-O. Now, my husband loves creme brulee, and I guess maybe that fits me more as a person because I am much more high maintenance and, sparkly on the outside, but, whatever the case may be. So, yes, definitely more Jell-O.
Creme brulee can never be Jell-O. You could never be Jell-O.
Have to be Jell-O.
You're never gonna be Jell-O.
I almost felt like that was another moment. It's like, I'm not sure anybody else but Julia Roberts could pull this off, because she does, but it's definitely a weird analogy to pull out.
Well, especially as a food critic, I'm thinking you literally could not think of anything else but Jell-O. And then as you watch Cameron Diaz in this movie, and this character, she's a lot smarter than they're having her come off as. You can tell she knows something is going on between Michael and Jules, that there is an attraction there. Like, she was not stupid and asking Jules to be her maid of honor and to be right there and kind of keeping a hawk eye on both of them, because she knew that there was something. So then this situation, Jules is basically treating her like an idiot. Like, he only wants Jell-O. I can be Jell-O. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, this is not a conversation that normal everyday people would have. Like it would be, I'm the one for him, not you. It would not be that situation. So it was funny. And, you can quote it. It's a very quotable scene, but it just in real life doesn't land.
Yeah. This wasn't initially part of my movie musings questions, but and I kind of meant to hit on it earlier, but how do you think this movie captured kind of that dynamic of like, clearly Jules can't stand like Kimberly at all, but that kind of like dynamic between women who like secretly hate each other but have to like basically fake their way through it? Like how do you feel about that portrayal in this movie?
I think it did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is, Kimmy, I've never been to Chicago. Like I've flown through, but that's one city I've not been able to travel to. And it's actually on my list. And it's really kind of another character of this movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But how so much of her family is from the South. And it seems like even like her parents, her mom has some of that Southern charm and Southern hospitality in the way that she does things. And maybe it's because they're more high society. But then you look at all of that. And so there's a level of false kindness that comes across, or false, I'm trying to think of the right word, where we can fake being nice really well. My friend calls it my pretty nasty voice. Whenever I say something that's kind of cutting, but I'm real sweet in my tone, she's like, oh, there's Sarah's pretty nasty voice again. And, I think we do that as Southern women really well, especially if there's somebody that we don't like. Whereas my husband is from the North. And so they're just more direct and they're just going to say whatever they say. So I think it was interesting watching these characters where, they really don't like each other. Even Julia Roberts played more into it of concealing that and pretending to be nice. Whereas I don't know if that would always be the case with her background of where she has lived and what she has done as a career. I think she would have been more direct, but maybe she's trying to match fire with fire. I'm not really quite sure.
Yeah, for sure. And this was the thought that just popped in my head. We don't have to dive into it too much, but just the fact that Jules gets thrown into this wedding the way she does so fast, it's just completely ridiculous.
Well, and I went to school in Abilene, so whenever they mentioned like line dancing in Abilene and her friend shattered her pelvis, I'm like, nobody does that. That doesn't even make sense. Like, what kind of line dancing are you doing? But yeah, I thought that was really hysterical.
Yeah. Well, and also I did like, regardless, I mean, we've all, and you don't have to say anybody for sure, but I mean, we've all had like a best friend, and I'm not even talking about having romantic feelings towards that person, but them dating somebody that you just like absolutely hate. And I think that's relatable, like for sure. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. In fact, we were with some friends recently, and the guy brought his girlfriend with him, and it was my first time meeting her. My husband had met her before, and we like this guy. We've known him a long time, and within 5 minutes, I'm thinking, I don't like her. Like, she is a really terrible person. And there was another girl with us, and I just kind of texted her. I'm like, is it just me? And that's all I said. And she just gave me this look like, no, it's not just you. So no, I think we have that times we have to be around people, that maybe we don't want to, but we want to keep that relationship. And so, yes, I would agree with that. That is, I think, a very common situation.
Yeah. And I don't think it's ever gone well where you actually spill the whole truth of how you feel about said person either.
Oh, that's a big life lesson. It doesn't matter if they're like on the rocks or even broken up. You do not ever reveal what you really think about them, because they will inevitably get back together and then never speak to you again.
Yeah, it's very much like one of those, just listen. And then if, and just confirm if that person, like your friend, says the things you've always thought, that's when you can kind of like be, But as far as just giving your flat out opinion, it usually doesn't ever go well.
Well, on the flip side, I remember having a boyfriend my freshman year of college that I brought home for the holidays for my family to meet and spend time with. And my mom likes everybody. Like, she is the most Pollyanna human being on the planet. And my best friends growing up came over and were spending some time with me and this boyfriend at the time. And one of them pulled me aside. She's like, I have never seen your mother give a look to anyone the way she is looking at your boyfriend. She despises him, like something is wrong. And it turned out she had every reason to have that look and to look at him. But it made me laugh because I'm like, it was kind of a reverse situation where I was really paying attention to who I was with and everybody else noticed.
Yeah, that's hilarious. My last question, a movie musings question was, do you and Tim have a song?
We do. Our song is actually I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith from the movie. Oh my gosh, what is the movie? It's the one with the big meteor.
Armageddon.
Yes, thank you. So yes, that is our song. And I love it because it'll come on and we'll look at each other from across the room because we've been together almost 26 years. We'll be married 24 this summer. And like, oh my gosh, there's our song. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was definitely, I'm a little bit younger than you, but that was definitely like, during my high school years. I mean, that played every dance that we went to at that time. Yeah, that song was inescapable. I actually didn't see that movie until like too terribly long ago and ended up liking it, enjoying it more than I ever thought I would.
It's a great movie. I mean, it really was well done, especially for at the time, but great cast and really great movie.
Rom-Com Rankings.
This first category, the romantic chemistry between the leads, a little interesting because of the ending that we talked about. But I mean, because ultimately this movie ends up with them not being together, but there's obviously something there. But like, how did you rank this category?
So here's my opinion. This isn't even really what you asked. There's definitely chemistry between Michael and Jules. There is chemistry between Michael and Kimmy. My viewpoint is that this marriage does not last, and Michael and Jules end up having an affair like a few years later. Now, whether they stay together, I don't know, but there is just something there between them that I don't think he's going to walk away from, and I don't think she's going to let it go. I mean, she may for the wedding, but I don't think it's going to last for long.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I could definitely see that. What would the sequel to their story be called? I wonder.
I don't know. The ex has revenge because then Kimmy comes after her. You never know what you could turn it into a horror movie at that point, and like she can become like a slasher person. I don't know. It could be really a very different turn.
I gave it a 2.5. Like I feel like it's there, but it's just something that's not fully there. And I think. I mean, it's almost evident of the movie poster, right? It's like Julia Roberts' face, like, and all the sub characters are in like tiny little boxes. And so it's like, as great as Maroney is, like in his roles and stuff like that, I don't know. I mean, Julia Roberts and George Clooney came out with that. I think it's Trouble in Paradise, like not too long ago. I mean, those are two like dynamic, like, actors, and there's not many people that can kind of rise to her level, I think. So that's kind of why I gave it 2.5. How would you rank it?
I would agree with that. About a 2.5. I think the only other one that maybe could rise to her level was Richard Gere when they did Runaway Bride. Yes, very much like he had his own following. And I mean, even them going back to Pretty Woman, that chemistry had been there for a long time.
Yeah. Once again, another journalist. He's a journalist.
that I believed. He was cynical enough to be a journalist, I think.
Okay. What about the best friend or friends? How did you rank this?
Oh, top of the charts. Like I absolutely loved Rupert Everett in that role. Like I thought he was fantastic. And then kind of side characters, but the cousins, Kimmy's cousins, they were something else. They're the family members you don't want to acknowledge or really have around, but they were funny and quirky in their own ways, and I mean very true to who they were in multiple instances of that movie. But I couldn't tell if they were really friends with Kimmy or not, but definitely popped in at different times of the plot.
Yeah. We've talked about Rupert Everett. Just him alone, I gave it a 5. But the other sub characters as well. Even though I don't blame them for seeming a bit kind of out of left field, like with the rest of the movie at times. I feel like what they've been asked to do, they're doing it really well. And
Yes.
so it'd be curious to see like if they saw this movie and they were like, wait, this was the movie that we were in, but yeah. So I gave it a 5. How would you rank it?
Definitely 5 stars.
Okay, awesome. Okay, the soundtrack. We kind of talked about it a little bit. Lots of like classic songs. The actual soundtrack itself, so like I guess what you would have bought in the store, was kind of a mix of these classic songs and kind of more just like artists, I guess, that were kind of popular at the time. But yeah, what did you think about it?
You can't go wrong with some Dionne Warwick or some Burt Bacharach. I mean, like, there's some great songs that are there as part of that soundtrack. And, you adding the hilarity on top of it and just the chaos and the comedy that goes with that chaos, I felt like all of those songs went really well. And I don't know, I kind of think I enjoy Rupert Everett singing Say a Little Prayer for You even more than Dionne Warwick. I'm like not really quite sure where to go with that because it was highly entertaining.
Yeah. I ultimately gave it a 3. Like, it just like some of the songs just truly liked. Some others I just like. Even as I started listening to it, I kind of forgot about the song. So not horrible, but definitely like you kind of have to cherry pick a little bit. So yeah, what would you give it?
I bet a 3.5.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. We also kind of hit on this ridiculous chase scene and declaration of love, which is a little interesting because, especially in this movie, it doesn't quite come at the like the end of this movie, like at the wedding. Kind of a lot is resolved as far as that goes, because by the time the wedding rolls around, you really feel like Jules is not going to do anything. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
Yeah,
especially after the scene between Kimmy and Jules in the restroom at the stadium where they really have it out at that point. And
I forgot how horrible that scene is.
Well, and how all these women are standing around and cheering her on and booing Julia Roberts. I mean, it is just the most ludicrous scene. But after watching that, and Jules has basically bared her soul and said, he's the one, he wants you, go marry the man of our dreams. And then how Kimmy like instantly forgives her. I mean, bless her. If that's really a true trait, like that's very unusual to find in people, to be quite so forgiving. But at that point, it would be a really horrible movie if Jules did anything else at the wedding. Like at that point, she just would need to be burned at the stake, I think, because you really can't go any lower than that.
Yeah. And so, I kind of talked about how just still in the bread truck and, I don't know. I didn't really connect to it. Maybe just the general theft kind of like diminished my feelings on this scene at the end, and you're talking about the Jello and the creme brulee and all that kind of stuff. So I gave it a 2. I don't know if you went lower than that or higher.
It's kind of conflicting because there's multiple declarations of love. So I would say about 1.5 to 2, depending on the situation, the character, what's happening, because there's a lot of that going around.
Yeah. Although I will say that she like, it's all about timing, right? And she should have said what she said to him like a long time ago. And the timing was definitely she lost her moment for sure. But as watching it, you are kind of glad that she finally does say it, just to have some relief, a little bit of like, okay, this little back and forth has got to stop. I'm kind of cutting myself off here. I will say the scene, kind of going back to romantic chemistry, where they're on the water taxi, like going through Chicago. We've actually been to Chicago quite a bit. We went was that last summer that we went to Chicago? Yeah. But anyway, we recently just did that tour, but I liked how they interplayed the bridges, them going underneath the bridges and stuff like that. That was like definitely a scene where you felt like the chemistry, even though I couldn't help but think like, I had jokingly said that, Whitney, do you think people would stare if we just started slow dancing like, on the boat? But anyway, I did like that scene. But okay, so rewatchability. This is kind of an interesting one because you said you've seen this movie a lot.
I have seen this a lot. I think it's one. Now, we don't have cable television anymore, but it was one that would just come on randomly on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. And so I would have it on in the background as I was doing other things. And as I said in the beginning, I think it's a very quotable movie. It has some really funny little quotes in it. I think it's, if you're not just sitting down to watch it, it's very rewatchable. Like, it's something great to have on in the background when you're folding laundry or doing dishes or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But just to sit and watch it, I would not necessarily do that again.
Yeah. I gave it 2.5, which is like just as a movie goes, and like my personal like rating of it, that's kind of what I gave it. Like, I don't think it's the worst movie ever by any means. I think there's some moments like there, but like you said, like that's when I thought I had seen this movie before. It was because I just had to pass it a lot of times. A quick little funny story I kind of laughed about when we were watching this movie, because, and this was definitely one when I realized I hadn't seen this before, is I've talked about it before, but when I proposed to Whitney, I made kind of a rom-com video, and it's just like a montage of all these rom-com moments, starting with like, and there's I intercut with all the chase scenes, and then at the end, these, kind of kissing moments and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, I laughed when we watched this because I put the scene of Michael like going away from her like at the wedding, and I just laughed because I was like, yeah, I definitely want to put that scene in your proposal in our engagement video, because that is completely not what was happening there. So,
well, even that scene at the end of the movie where they're about to leave on their honeymoon, and then he turns around and comes and finds her. I just kept going, why? Like, this is a relationship you need to be moving on from. Like, this is not healthy.
Yeah. What was that conversation to like Kimberly? I mean, that's right. Maybe right when the marriage starts falling apart, like you were predicting, of like they get in the limo and he goes, "Hey, I need to go to say one more thing to Jules." Like, but I did 2.5. How would you rank it?
I would between a 2.5 and a 3. I mean, it's nothing life changing or earth shattering. It has funny moments. It has obviously iconic scenes and phrases that are used a lot. So I think in that regard, again, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. There are some that are horrible, but this is just, it's fun. And for me, it's nostalgic. I mean, that was in the years of meeting my husband and all of us kind of thinking about marriage. That was really something of the time that was precious to us. And so it is nostalgic for me watching that, even though I didn't necessarily love it. Spending my time with my friends watching that brings back some very, very sweet memories for me.
Yeah, and I'm definitely glad that I watched this movie, because even seeing it at number 8 on this list, like, I don't think I even necessarily went, "Oh, that's high." It's just a movie I've always heard as being like, "Oh, this is one of the better rom-coms." So I was really shocked by like my response to it, but very validated when I even got the message from you today saying you're expressing your feelings about it. So I'm definitely glad that I saw it, because it's definitely a movie that like you said, has the iconic lines and the scenes. I mean, if you took the scene of the restaurant of them all singing and stuff like that, and you take that out of context of the movie, it's like a nice little like memorable scene, like, for sure. So I'm glad I saw it, just as far as like saying that I've seen it now. I don't know if even I would just like, pop it in to watch it again, but maybe if it was on, I might could kind of laugh again at some of the ridiculousness of what's happening.
So interesting. It's number 8. Like, that's very curious to me. But then I love to go on IMDb and just read about everything and read reviews. And this was fairly lower rated than a lot of the other movies I've seen. And it is, I think, a 6.5, which for it being a number 8 on the rom-com list, but the average scoring is 6.5 out of 10. I feel like that's not very high. I mean, a lot of people had very strong feelings about her character and about this movie and about the deceptions. I just think it's a very interesting situation.
Yeah. And I'm not a big Rotten Tomatoes person, but it's 74% like fresh and 73% audience score. So people just really like this movie, and I don't know if it's just me being older, and taking it, as it is now as an older adult, versus maybe being around the age of, and you're like living in that world of like trying to find love or whatever. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that it's that high.
Recommendations.
I don't really have any recommendations because we've been really busy. Do you have anything that you've been watching?
We have actually. We've been watching Resident Alien. We had never watched it before, and we had finished up several other shows, and it's on Netflix. And Alan Tudyk plays the lead in this show. And have you watched this one at all?
No, Resident Alien. No,
Resident Alien. Oh my word!
I like that guy.
So he's done mainly like voiceover work. He
Yeah.
has not done as much in front of the camera, but the premise is he's an alien that crashes into Earth and ends up taking the form of a human, and through various events becomes like this small town doctor playing this role. And the only way he learns humans is by watching Law and Order. And the only one that can see him in his true alien form is a 10-year-old kid. So he keeps trying to kill this kid. And then like the way he interacts, he has no emotion. He's very forthright and frank and very direct. So the way he's interacting with patients and other people is hysterical. It is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And do not skip like the little intro part. It's different every episode, and it's like literally 5 seconds, but it is so funny. It is a show that we both laugh every single episode.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great recommendation because I mean, I'm on top of such things. I wasn't aware of the show, and it seems like it's like really, really beloved. And looking at the cast, Linda Hamilton's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. How do you say his last name? Alan
Tudyk.
Tudyk. Yeah. I mean, I definitely recognize him. He's, like he's a pirate in Dodgeball. I like automatically. He was actually in. We watched Knocked Up not too long ago. He plays a little like role in there. So he's definitely a familiar face and stuff like that. So. Oh, that's great. We've been looking kind of for some new stuff. So it like rating wise, is that like something?
I probably wouldn't watch it with kids around.
Okay.
There's definitely some adult situations and language and things like that.
Okay.
The other one I've been watching, which this is actually in its third season, is The Cleaning Lady that was on Fox TV.
Okay.
Actually based on, I think it was a Cambodian TV series, but this woman was a doctor in Cambodia, and her son was deathly ill with a very rare disease. So she illegally immigrates into the U.S. to try and get him this life-saving procedure, and is cleaning on the side to make money. It ends up viewing a really horrific like mob hit. And so the mobster ends up hiring her to clean up after these various things. So it's a really great kind of thrilling show. But the main male character actually died in real life in like the last like 6 months. So I was very curious how that storyline was going to go since he's not with us anymore. But
yeah,
great show.
Oh, wow.
And that one's on Hulu.
Okay, great. I know who to message now if we when we start having a lull. So yeah, as I discussed in the last podcast, I've just been watching a lot of basketball right now. So and just because of life, we just have been busy. So pretty much like I've just been trying to watch content for this podcast, so I haven't had many chances to watch other things. So those are great recommendations. I need to check those out. So well, thank you so much for jumping on and doing this again. So I'm glad we had a similar taste in our mouth with this movie. So I didn't know quite how that was going to go. So never, I don't mind. Like, I just feel like we're on the kind of same wavelength with this movie.
I feel like you can have a spirited debate with someone if you have opposing views, but if you have more similar views, it definitely helps the conversation.
I hope I didn't get your, what did you call it? Your Southern nasty, what was that?
Pretty nasty voice.
Yeah, pretty nasty voice. So yeah, when I'm editing this later, I'm going to try to see if I can pick up on any of that during this. So hopefully that didn't happen too much.
No, I think I was pretty genuine right now. So you've been good tonight.
Right now. So,
that's right.
So, yeah. Gosh, I'll be second guessing everything now. So yeah, no. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
It was good to chat. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Whitney was just dying to give a recommendation.
Well, now it's not going to be that good of a recommendation.
What is it?
Well, I just wanted to. You always ask me, and so while I was sitting here in my seat, I thought I got to have a recommendation, and then I didn't have one, so now I do.
Real quick, just so everybody knows, when Whitney says in her seat, I have really worked on this podcast studio to make this the optimal
You
experience.
have really worked on it?
But
Are you kidding me?
Whitney is currently in a theater lounge type of seat. Is that the best way to...
white leather recliner. Like, I'm living it up over here.
Yeah. So, okay. This is my second time to cut you off. I apologize.
Rude. Well, so I was just trying to make sure I had a recommendation. So, I mean, this wasn't really something I probably should have come back on for. But I think most of the world is reading Kristen Hanna books.
Oh, okay.
But so I tried to go and get The Women, which I have not gotten my hands on yet at my Libby app at the library. But so I got one that was available, which was Four Winds.
Okay.
She's a historical fiction author for anybody that needs a new author. And she's a great writer. It's great writing. It was called The Four Winds, and it's about the Dust Bowl. And I learned so many things, but I was horrified through most of the book. It was really hard to read, to be honest. Yeah. But it's about a family who was in the Texas Panhandle through the Dust Bowl, and then they had to move to California and blah, 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 blah. But all that happens to them. But I've been disgusted by, like, the dust that came in, and the cows were filled with dirt when they'd finally have to kill the cow because it didn't produce any more milk. And then they'd cut them open, and they were full of, like, dirt and mud, and it was just disgusting. But it's really good, and I learned a lot about the Dust Bowl, and I'm from Oklahoma. I should have known about it, but people were rude about Oklahomans and called them Okies, and I'm still proud to be an Okie, but yeah, that's really it. I just think you should find her. She was a good author, and read about her books. That's it.
I thought you didn't. I thought you weren't enjoying that book.
I'm not, because it was painful to read, but I learned so much, and I did enjoy it.
So you ultimately now recommend it to people?
I would recommend it the whole time. I thought about it a lot, so it was very thought-provoking. Yeah. I really do like to read more. Hallie informed me that it was called realistic fiction. Okay. But I would call them almost rom-coms in fiction form. Yeah, things. I really would rather read that, so I'm having to cleanse my palate with some really just, girly novel at the moment. But I did learn a lot, and I think she was a great writer. I said that the whole time. Yeah, you did. It just stressed me to no end as a mom and so it's not like a pleasant read. Yeah. You got to be ready to tackle some hard things. Yeah. But
I wish people could see your face right now, because that is exactly the face. So, we don't do this all the time, but often we go and take walks separately, but you like to go to listen to your books. And I knew you were listening to this book, but whenever you would come in to the house, you had that same look on your face, just, just kind of like, not bewilderment, but just
traumatized.
Maybe traumatized. Yeah.
So if you want to read something and be traumatized, that's your book.
Yeah. So did you not read The Grapes of Wrath at all?
No, I didn't read The Grapes of Wrath, but that's what it's about. So I learned a lot. So instead of reading Grapes of Wrath, read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna.
Not too terribly long ago, I watched the movie The Grapes of Wrath, but you did not watch it with me because it was probably black and white.
No, I don't like black and white.
Well, next week, our guest is going to be none other than your father, and we're going to talk about the movie Something's Gotta Give.
Oh, I like that movie.
Yeah.
And I like my father.
There you go. It'll be an interesting conversation because there's a lot of physical intimacy in this movie. So
with old people, too. Nonetheless.
Yeah. So, I'm going to have to work really hard not to use the phrase old people a lot in the conversation.
Yeah, he'll be offended.
All right. Well, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, you got it.